Sorghum is a robust and drought-tolerant crop grown throughout the semi-arid tropics. Farmers in Africa and Asia use sorghum grain for food and stalks as feed for their animals, as well as building materials and fuel for cooking. Unfortunately, in farmers' fields in Africa, sorghum yields are often less than 1 ton of grain per hectare, while it's possible to harvest more than 3 tons per hectare. Besides soil fertility, drought, weeds and insects, variable stand density and missing planting holes are also important causes of low yields. Making sure that your crop stand has the appropriate density is key to achieving a good yield. So, increasing plant populations by reducing the row-to-row and planting-hole-to-planting-hole distance is an early and key step to achieving a uniform crop stand and a high yield. On the other hand, when plants are too close to each other, this can hamper good crop development. The plants will be thin and will be susceptible to diseases and pests such as the parasitic weed striga. So, to get strong plants and a good yield, it's essential to sow the crop at the appropriate density and to avoid sowing too many seeds per planting hole. In this video, we'll learn about the best planting density for sorghum. We will understand what factors can affect crop establishment, and then see how thinning and transplanting can help to get a uniform crop stand and high yield. For sorghum, maintain a distance of 30 to 40 centimeters between planting holes within the rows, and a distance of about 75 centimeters between rows. If you sow sorghum on a poor soil, and if you use a variety that tills well, you can increase the distance to 50 centimeters between planting holes in the same row to allow for proper crop development. The poorer the soil, the more surface and volume of soil the roots need to extract nutrients. On the other hand, the more fertile the soil, or the more fertilizer applied, the more we can increase the density of the crop. If you sow at a distance of a forearm, if there are missing planting holes, this will be hardly noticeable, and you can choose whether to re-sow or not, because the number of planting holes can fill up this empty space. About 2 to 3 plants per planting hole allow the plants to grow strong and well-developed panicles. If there are many plants in the same planting hole, these plants will not be vigorous and the stems will be thin, which means they cannot resist striga. But 1 or 2 plants per planting hole allows the plants to be vigorous before striga emerges. Start by using seeds that are healthy, clean, and have a good germination. If more than 8 out of 10 seeds germinate, it's good seed. Sow about 5 to 8 seeds per planting hole, providing that rainfall is sufficient. Apart from poor rainfall, some other things can result in poor crop establishment. After sowing, the birds cut the young plants, and this will reduce density. When birds have caused damage, this can result in empty spaces in the field. There will be parts that have a good density and parts that are empty. Surface runoff or stagnation of water, drought, rats and mice, insects and diseases can also negatively affect crop establishment. If we notice that germination was bad, we can decide to re-sow the missing planting holes within 2 to 3 weeks after sowing. Make sure to re-sow within 3 weeks after sowing, Otherwise, the resown plants will be behind in development in comparison to those sown first. When the difference in age between plants is too large, this can lead to poor crop development of resown planting holes and hinder the work in the field. Thinning and transplanting has many advantages for achieving a proper uniform development of sorghum and a good yield. So after sowing, instead of thinking about resowing, you take the plants from thinned planting holes with too many plants and transplant them in the empty spaces in the field. From about 3 weeks after sowing onwards, identify parts of the field where the number of plants per planting hole is too high. Then decide if and where it's necessary to thin the planting holes. Then, if there are many missing planting holes, you can plant the missing planting holes with the excess young plants that you thinned earlier. In general, if you see more than 4 plants per planting hole, in many planting holes, it's better that you thin. It's recommended to thin and transplant when the soil is very humid. So, how do we thin? You take the 2 plants you want to keep in one hand. Then with the other hand, you pull the rest of the plants sideways, away from the plants you want to keep. Make sure that the roots of the plants you want to keep stay in the soil. And how do we transplant? First of all, to increase the chance that the transplanted plants survive, cut the leaves just above the growing tip of the plants. This helps the plant conserve its water before the roots establish, and can start taking up water from the soil. Walk past the rows that have missing planting holes, and drop 2 plants at every spot that has a missing planting hole. At the end of the row, you turn around and walk back with your hoe in one hand. At every spot where a plant was dropped, make a small hole with your hoe. Plant the 2 plants in the hole and close it with soil. These 2 techniques allow you to attain an optimal plant density, which will give the highest probability for a good yield. So let's remind ourselves of the key elements to achieve an optimal density for a sorghum crop. Creating an optimal density of your sorghum crop is the first requirement to attaining a good yield. Make sure the seed has high germination and sow the planting holes at about 5 to 8 seeds per planting hole. Maintain a distance of 30 to 40 centimeters between planting holes and 70 centimeters between rows. Re-sow missing planting holes within 3 weeks after sowing. From 3 weeks after sowing onwards, observe your fields and determine whether and where it's necessary to thin and/or transplant. Thin planting holes to 2 plants per planting hole and keep the thinned plants. Select the healthy and vigorous plants for transplanting and cut off leaves just above the growing tip to improve establishment. Transplant 2 plants per planting hole into missing planting holes. Let's listen to a farmer from Wakoro village in Mali who's convinced of the advantage of thinning and transplanting. It is a good practice because the field you see here was thinned and transplanted, and that is why these panicles are big like this.